She brought up an open marriage out of nowhere, saying it wouldn't change how much we love each other. I hesitated but agreed in the moment. Days later, I wanted to take it back only to find out she had already acted on it. Now she says I approved, but I feel like I was set up. Apologies for the length, but I feel all this detail is necessary. I'm a 30-year-old man, married to my wife, 29, for 8 years. We dated for just over a year before that and were friends for about 3 years before we started dating. We have a 17-month-old daughter who has me wrapped around her finger. Let me start by saying that I really love my wife. I would have described our relationship and marriage as amazing up until the last few weeks. This is a tough story to share. About 2 months ago, I had a surprising conversation with my wife. We were sitting on the couch after putting our daughter to bed and having dinner, with a couple of glasses of wine. Out of nowhere, she brought up the idea of monogamy and having an open or semi-open relationship. The conversation was long and unexpected, but the main takeaways were: we both felt that our love for each other was stronger than ever. We believed our relationship had evolved past the traditional monogamy norms and that either of us could potentially sleep with someone else without affecting the core of our relationship. We agreed that if either of us ever wanted to experience being with someone else, it would be allowed, as long as it didn't interfere with time spent together, with our child, or take away emotional capacity for each other. If it were to happen, we had to be open and safe about it, with no sneaking around. We both had veto power at any time over the situation or person involved, or so I thought, read on. Keep in mind, this had never come up in our 8 years of marriage or 12+ years of knowing each other. At the time, I remember being completely caught off guard and amazed that my wife had initiated the conversation. She had a lot more sexual experience before we met, while I had only been with her. In that moment, I couldn't help but feel like I'd been given a golden ticket. I was raised in a very strict Southern Baptist home, and while I've since left that behind, I still carried some regret for not playing the field in college. Now, I had been given the opportunity to do so without any consequences. I walked away feeling more respect for our marriage and how open we both were about it. Fast forward to the next day, I woke up and, as the fog cleared, I had one of those "WTF just happened" moments. My gut felt heavy, and something about it all seemed wrong. I wanted to take it all back but didn't speak up right away. I chalked it up to lingering doubt from my past upbringing. I decided to take a couple of days to process everything. Less than a week after the conversation, my wife came home acting strangely after supposedly going to a coffee shop to work. She seemed nervous, which made me feel nervous too. I asked her who she was with, and she told me it was a guy friend of a friend, Mr. X, someone we'd met a couple of months ago. I was shocked that she had acted on our agreement so quickly. This is where our versions of events differ. I told my wife that I wasn't comfortable with the open relationship and wanted to take it back. I asked if anything had happened, and she said no, but that it was likely going that way, and she was attracted to him. I told her I didn't like the guy and didn't want her seeing him again. She reassured me everything was fine and said I didn't have to worry about anything between them, which I took as confirmation that it was over. I felt relieved and thought our marriage was too important to risk. Unfortunately, I found out later that she interpreted the conversation differently. She said when she said I didn't have to worry, she meant it would continue, but wouldn't affect our marriage. She's been seeing him for a couple of weeks now. I don't know the details. Now I'm wondering if this was all a way to get me to agree to the affair. She has more free time than I do, and the timing seems suspicious. She insists it's just a coincidence. Today, I was a mess at work. I asked her if I wanted to end this and go back to how things were. What would she do? She said she'd have no choice but to comply, but wouldn't like it. Now I'm confused. Was this an affair or just a huge misunderstanding? Am I overreacting because she went ahead with it? Should I accept it, or is this a deal breaker? First comment update. Thanks for the comments, it's been cathartic to write this out. It's clear that poor communication played a big role in this mess. I regret not being more explicit about my discomfort early on. I wrongly assumed my wife felt as conflicted as I did. Lesson learned: no more gray areas on this topic moving forward. I'm almost certain she wasn't involved with this guy before our initial discussion. She insists nothing physical happened until after she thought I had approved it, though she admitted she had considered it beforehand. I also don't believe she's cheated in the past, but after our last conversation, I wonder if that was more due to lack of opportunity than actual restraint. We talked again last night. She doesn't see this as cheating, just an agreement I'm now regretting. She apologized for the miscommunication and claims if she knew I wasn't okay with it, she wouldn't have gone through with it. When I told her, I don't want to share you, she responded, that's not your choice, you don't own me. She admitted her desire for an open relationship has been building for years but only recently thought I'd be open to it. She insists it's not about any inadequacy on my part and that she still loves me. She also admitted this is a pattern for her, something she doubts will change, and was hoping to manage it within our marriage. If forced to choose, she'd return to monogamy but wouldn't be happy and isn't sure it's sustainable. She believes I secretly want this too, that I'm just scared, and that given time, I'll come around. I'm struggling with that. I did initially agree, but only because I wasn't thinking clearly. Now, I feel like I have two options. Try out an open relationship and see if I can handle it while maintaining a normal family life. File for divorce. It doesn't sound like going back to the way things were will work. She says I'm the most important thing in her life but also admits monogamy wouldn't make her happy. I never expected marriage to come down to a choice where one of us has to sacrifice our happiness for the other. Life really sucks today. Second comment update. I've been putting off this update because I don't have anything positive to add, it's all just too depressing. But here goes. I'll try to keep it brief, though no promises. We're still together, and I haven't taken any formal steps toward divorce, aside from implying that it's my last option. Since my last update, I've had more discussions with my wife, and each time, a new version of the truth emerges, new explanations for her motivations and when her desire for others actually began. The latest version. She claims she's always been this way, but managed to suppress it for most of our marriage. However, over the last 1 to 2 years, she's felt trapped and not alive, which infuriates me, but more on that later. The stress of life, combined with this feeling, apparently pushed her to act. Some realizations on my part. She genuinely seems to believe I approved of her moving forward with this. Whether that's true or she's just convinced herself of it, I don't know. Her main concern seems to be proving this wasn't deception. She insists nothing has changed in our relationship. From her perspective, she still loves me and wants to be with me, primarily, in poly terms. She keeps saying, if you gave it a try, you'd see it's no big deal. She knows this is hurting me but continues anyway, as if she assumes I'll eventually just accept it. About 2 weeks ago, after my last update, I wrote everything down, my feelings, my boundaries, and what I wanted so there could be no misunderstandings. I made 3 clear requests. This open/poly/ whatever the hell this is ends. We start marriage counseling immediately. She cuts all contact with X. I left the letter downstairs and went out for a while, not wanting to be there when she read it. When I got back, she sat in silence for 30 minutes. Eventually, we talked, and she admitted she might be having an early midlife crisis but needed time to process everything. I agreed to give her time. Then, my parents came into town for 4 days, perfect timing. So I had to put on a happy face and pretend everything was fine. Once they left, we revisited the conversation. She again insisted she genuinely thought I was aware of what was happening and was okay with it. Whether that's the truth or just her version of it, I can't say. However, she did tell me she broke things off with X the day after reading my letter. This conversation was a turning point for me because I came to several realizations. She genuinely doesn't believe she's done anything fundamentally wrong or refuses to accept that she has. She isn't going to change, at least not willingly. If she does, it would only be out of fear of losing our daughter or the stability of our family, but she'd resent me for it. She truly believes this situation isn't as big a deal as I make it out to be, and that if I just gave it a chance, I'd come around to her perspective. There were moments when I was this close to saying, screw this, we're done, but instead, I ended up basically agreeing to it all again. Call it a lack of courage if you want, but that's not what I felt in the moment. Here's what makes this so painful. I love my daughter, and I love the life we've built as a family when my wife isn't off sleeping with some hipster loser. I don't want to lose that. Not just for me, but more importantly, for my daughter. If she didn't exist, I'd probably be talking about how my divorce is going and how I plan to fight for the majority of our assets given the circumstances. But she does exist. And I don't want her growing up splitting time between parents, wondering why she doesn't have a normal family. I never had to deal with that, my wife did, and her parents' messy divorce scarred her. You'd think that experience would make her less likely to destroy our marriage, but here we are. My parents have been together for nearly 40 years, and I wanted that for my kids too, even if it means making huge sacrifices. And the really twisted part. I wonder if my wife knows this and is using it against me. She knows I'm someone who forgives easily, avoids blame, and wants to keep the peace. Is she taking advantage of that consciously or not? Maybe. But what am I supposed to do? I feel like JFK would have felt if the Soviets had landed an invasion force on the East Coast. The military would have demanded an all-out nuclear strike, but that would have meant destroying everything. So do you win by standing your ground, even if it costs you everything? These are the thoughts I've been wrestling with. I started this by saying I love my wife. That's still true. For the past 8 years, she's been my best friend. You might think that, based on everything I've said, there must have been something deeply wrong in our relationship from the start. But honestly, I can't pinpoint anything. We faced the usual stresses that come with life and parenting, but nothing overwhelming. Our life is comfortable, not wealthy, but certainly not struggling. We always made time for each other, shared many interests and activities, and our sex life was great, her words, not just mine. My wife works from home in a flexible job and has always had the freedom to explore any hobby, interest, or friendship, which, until now, had been non-sexual. We waited 6 years before trying for kids, only moving forward when we both agreed though, honestly, I was the one who wanted children more. Maybe that played a role in all of this. I don't know. But the suddenness of everything is part of why I've struggled to act decisively. It's hard to simply label her as a cheating, heartless person and walk away. It just doesn't make sense. Why would someone with a stable, fulfilling life throw everything away like this? The only explanations I can come up with are, either she truly wants this lifestyle and believes it's what will make her happy, or she's dealing with something deeper, something psychological that needs help. I don't know how to handle either possibility. From her perspective, I probably seem indecisive, like I'm flip-flopping on the whole situation. And maybe I am. So far, I've reluctantly agreed, in principle, to a semi-open relationship, only to back out twice. But each time, it feels like my only choices are surrender or divorce. And after 8 years, the weight of that decision is immense. If it were just the two of us, maybe it would be easier, but with a child in the picture, the fallout feels overwhelming. Right now, I'm bouncing between numbness, anger, depression, and the occasional fleeting sense that life is okay. But mostly, I just feel numb. The past couple of weeks have been rough, with some really low moments. Sleep has been terrible. And I don't have many outlets to process all of this, only one friend I feel comfortable opening up to. That's why I genuinely appreciate everyone here for reading and commenting, even if it's just a joke or a STFU and delete the gym. Update. Shortly after my last update, I finally gave my wife an ultimatum. I told her, plain and simple, that things couldn't continue like this if she didn't end things with her boyfriend and commit to marriage counseling immediately, then we were done. She agreed, but her response was indifferent. She only ever said she wanted to work on our relationship when I directly asked, and even then, her tone was more irritated than anything else. From that point on, her attitude toward me turned completely cold. Any sign of affection disappeared. She stopped engaging in conversations unless I initiated and sustained them. Even the smallest gestures like a reassuring touch or a quick kiss goodbye were gone. If I hugged her, she would reciprocate, but with clear tension, like she was only tolerating it. She carried herself with an air of I'm here because I have to be. We've now done 7 weeks of therapy, 5 together and 2 separately. The experience has been mixed. Most sessions have focused on figuring out how we got to this point, what broke in our marriage, and how to prevent it from happening again. Unsurprisingly, according to my wife, almost everything seems to be my fault. In my previous posts, I mentioned how her explanations kept shifting, and in therapy, the narrative became entirely about my shortcomings as a husband. She claimed she had been unhappy for a long time, mainly because I was constantly in a bad mood or depressed due to my job. For context, I've been working corporate 9 to 5 jobs in software since I graduated in 2003. It's not my passion, and I've been looking for a way out of the corporate grind for years. At times, it has made me unhappy, but it wasn't a constant state of depression, more like periods of frustration that might last a few days or, at worst, a few months in a particularly miserable job. When I pointed out in therapy that my job provides us with financial stability, especially since she works freelance with an unpredictable income and no benefits, she became defensive and hostile. She also accused me of spending too much time on hobbies, saying that we had drifted apart. That one really stung. I've always been mindful of how I balance my personal time, and it's rare that a week goes by where most of my non-work time isn't spent at home with her. Sure, in recent years, I picked up some hobbies that she wasn't interested in, but we still spent time together at home, going out, on dates, everything you'd expect in a healthy marriage. Yes, there were times when I withdrew, especially when I was feeling low. That's just how I cope. Maybe that played a role, but it doesn't explain everything. Everything she pointed out, my frustration with my job, spending less time with her, being emotionally withdrawn, contained some truth, which made it difficult to argue against. The best deceptions always have a grain of reality, I suppose. Some of what she said had been true at certain points, but it was always exaggerated and blown out of proportion. None of it truly explained why our marriage unraveled over the past 6 months. Whenever I tried to shift the conversation toward why she had given up on our marriage, started lying, and refused to acknowledge any wrongdoing, she would instantly become defensive, even angry. She absolutely refused to have that conversation. If I challenged her narrative or pointed out inconsistencies, she would snap, "See? This is exactly what you do. You just argue with me." During our very first therapy session, the therapist asked her directly about the status of her relationship with Mr. X. Her exact words: "Well, that's definitely on hold." Not, "it's over," but "on hold." She chose her words carefully, and I knew it. I didn't call her out in the moment, but I definitely took note of it. By the 3rd session, it was obvious that the only way to make progress was to focus almost entirely on my shortcomings, what I had done wrong and what I needed to fix. We discussed my frustration with my job and ways to improve my outlook. We talked about better communication, addressing issues before resentment built up, and being more direct instead of sugarcoating or avoiding conflict. All of this was useful, sure, but I kept hoping that if I shouldered more of the blame, she might soften and eventually acknowledge that she was just as responsible as I was. Maybe she'd even offer a real, heartfelt apology. Wishful thinking, I know. Meanwhile, nothing at home improved. Things weren't necessarily getting worse, but they were cold, distant, and mechanical. She wouldn't initiate conversations unless absolutely necessary, and if I tried to talk about anything deeper, she would quickly grow irritated. I asked her outright, "You do want things to get better, right?" But I never got a real answer. Not a yes, but not a no either, just vague, non-committal responses. "Well, I'm going to therapy with you, aren't I?" Or sometimes just a dismissive, "I don't know how I feel. I just need time to go through the motions." Okay, fine. Maybe I was expecting too much too soon. This whole situation had been traumatic for both of us, so maybe I just needed to be patient. Or maybe I was just fooling myself. Let's rewind to that first therapy session. It's definitely on hold. Now, picture a zoomed-in rage comic focusing on hold. Yeah. That phrase never stopped nagging at me. About 3 weeks into therapy, I couldn't take the paranoia anymore. I had noticed my wife was suddenly glued to her phone, keeping it within reach at all times, something that wasn't like her at all. Then, one day, I accidentally bumped her laptop, waking it up, and noticed it was now password protected. Suspicious, to say the least. At this point, I knew that if I asked her directly, I wouldn't get the truth. So, I did what any tech-savvy person in my situation would do. I accessed her email through the server. She must have forgotten that I set up and still manage her domain, whoops. And there it was. She had never stopped talking to Mr. X. They had been in near-daily contact this entire time. While I didn't find anything as blatant as, "Hey, let's hook up," your husband is clueless, LOL, their conversations were clearly more than just sharing funny cat videos. There were "I love you" messages exchanged, and she was openly discussing our marriage struggles with him. Cue a surge of rage and heartbreak. The worst part? I couldn't confront her outright. Even though I felt justified, I had still invaded her privacy, and I wanted her to expose herself rather than admit I had snooped. So, about a week later, I casually worked it into a conversation. "I've noticed you've been really protective of your phone lately. Also, something's been bugging me back in therapy. You said things with Mr. X were on hold. Are you still talking to him?" After some awkward stammering, she admitted they were still in contact, but, according to her, it was just him sending her random news articles. She claimed she was keeping her phone close because she didn't want me seeing a text pop up and misinterpreting it. I knew this was, at best, a massive understatement, but I didn't let on. At our next therapy session, I brought it up toward the end. The therapist seemed mildly surprised. My wife's reaction. She rolled her eyes and sighed, "Oh, here we go." That was it. The session ended before we could even unpack it. Outside of therapy, nothing changed. She remained cold and distant. She never brought it up again, and when I tried, she immediately got defensive and angry. "That's all this is about to you, isn't it?" I dropped it. I kept monitoring her email, and while I didn't find any concrete proof of a physical affair, I couldn't see her sent messages. I also knew most of their conversations likely happened via text or Facebook, things I had no access to. Maybe, in her mind, this was all harmless. Maybe she truly believed that maintaining a platonic relationship with Mr. X was fine, despite knowing how I felt about it. Or maybe I was just making excuses for her, something I had gotten too good at. So here we are. My wife still has a relationship with him, even though she knows it's unacceptable to me. Maybe it's strictly emotional, maybe not. Either way, she doesn't seem particularly invested in fixing our marriage. When cornered, she'll claim she wants to, but only if I press her, and even then, her responses are vague at best. The only time she genuinely seems happy is when we're playing with our daughter. I've done everything I can. I still cling to fragments of hope, but maybe it's time to let go. Is there even a chance of saving this? Has anyone been in a relationship this far gone where your partner clearly isn't in love with you anymore and is actively deceiving and hurting you and managed to turn it around? Thanks for reading, Reddit. You made it. As promised, Cake. In response to a question about his daughter, OP explained. Custody is essentially a 50-50 split. Technically, my ex has primary custody, something she fought for mainly to secure child support, even though our incomes are nearly identical and we share parenting time equally. Looking back, I wish I had approached the divorce and custody process differently, knowing now just how unfairly the system can be stacked against fathers. It's been 10 years since this last update, and OP hasn't posted anything since.